Jon Turk, cheers to you.
Hey, I wish I had a glass of beer to raise to you. Hey, Kevin, it's great to see your face. It's great to be back.
Man, I haven't seen you since, pre-COVID, like the shows before the world fell apart.
Yeah, we were young men then. We didn't have white hair, and we danced around.
Fantastic. Now the to tell everybody out there how I know you is from just shows. I mean, in one sense, the only time we really actually get to chat is when we sit beside each other to sign books.
Right.
And I did once go into one of your shows and said, wow, he's got a lot to say.
You have all this accumulated wisdom that you learn from the people, from the landscape itself. It's my contention that these wisdoms about learning to live with the landscape, learning to survive with the landscapes, are applicable not just to adventuring, but to our whole way of life. If a polar bear starts running towards you, you're out on the ice, a polar bear starts running towards you, you get like nervous. I've come to understand that complex deeds are accomplished through quixotic images and quiet but persistent dreams. Well, thank you, buddy.
We're very good, very poetic too. So I got a script, even though I never keep to the script.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Show it to me.
I know. All right, but so let's say nobody's ever met you before. Who are you, and what do you do?
Yeah, well, who am I? What do I do? That's a non-Zen question because I'm having to, pump myself in the past. But yeah, I got a PhD in chemistry in 1971, and that was the old days, the hippie days and everything. And I woke up one morning and I said, I don't want to be a PhD chemist. And I grabbed a canoe and tied it on the top of a 64 Ford Fairlane and drove up and floated down the Mackenzie and then over the Rat Pass into the Yukon. And I went, oh, this is what I want to do. So that's who I became. I worked for a number of years writing science textbooks, environmental science textbooks. And then my journeys became bigger and bigger. And people said to me, well, if you're a writer, why don't you write about your adventures? So I started doing that. And then I was paddling a kayak and some kayak-like boat from Japan to Alaska across the Pacific. And I bumped into this village. Well, it wasn't just I bumped in, we were paddling along and this storm comes up. There was this village, so paddle into the village and get out of our kayaks and, stretch, creaky, you've been in the boat for 10 hours. And this woman says, welcome, it's good to see you. The grandmother created the storm to bring you to her village. She wants to talk to you. And I go, okay, look, there's a storm out there. If we go out there, we're going to get munched. There's a house in here. I can smell bread baking in the oven. I'm going to agree with you. I'm not in a position to be cynical. And I went in, we met the grandmother, and then that went on for essentially 5 years. I spent not steady, but back and forth in the village for 5 years. And then Moolynaut, the old shaman woman, shaped me and altered my way of thinking. And that became part of who I am. And now I'm 75, I'm an old man. I just wrote my last book. I think it's my last book. And that's what we're here to talk about today.
Well, yeah. Well, let's look at some of the other books and travels before we get to that one. And also also when I first read your book, I mean, I think it's the first page. You said this is your last book. I was like, how can a writer say that? You can't say that.
Well, I'm old now. I can say it's my last book, and I'm not a politician. And if I lie, you can call me a liar, and that's okay. We'll have a beer and think about that.
Hey, we didn't think ABBA was going to come back. And look at that.
There we go. Here we are.
Well, look at the one book. Well, first of all, your first book was Cold Ocean, right?
Correct.
Okay. So and that's when you went from, instead of the textbook, because I'm thinking you're writing a textbook for a college level education, you can't really show your opinion. It's just sort of ideas, right?
Right.
And then so you sort of said, look, I want to give my opinion, or not my opinion, but my value system. And then you wrote the Cold Ocean. But then you go throw right into it. Was it actually in the wake of the Joman?
Wake of the Joman or Yoman, I'm not sure. Joman,
Okay.
I call it.
But before you even talk about the book, talk about the journey. Like, people don't, if people don't know about the trips you've done, the jaw will drop. Okay. You went from Japan to Alaska across the Pacific Ocean.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's just one paddle stroke at a time. You're a paddler, you know that. It's just a lot of paddle strokes. But yeah, it's been a great freedom to look. I'm a scientist. I'm still a scientist. I believe in science 100%. But science isn't the only way to look at it. Einstein, one of the greatest scientists who ever lived, said, if we're going to get out of the mess we're in, we have to think in ways that we haven't thought when we created this mess. And the world we live in today has been created by science, and it has a lot of wonderful things. We have iPhones and all that kind of things and nice stuff. But at the same time, we got big problems. And we're not going to be able to, we haven't solved our big problems through science. So to get out of the scientific world and start looking at the world beyond science, not excluding science, but beyond science is a great freedom. And it's why I made the shift from being a science writer to being a writer that can say anything I want.
You draw a crowd, I tell you that. You go to all those shows and your place is packed. But you look at also that other book, Crocodiles and Ice. Well, personal question, what's the title? Like, what's behind the title, Crocodiles and Ice?
Crocodiles and Ice. It was a book. We did this Ellesmere expedition, circumnavigated Ellesmere, and we got a lot of good press for that.
Well, okay, so you got to explain. Sorry, John. You just randomly say, "Oh, we just pal around Ellesmere Island." That took you 3 months.
Okay. Let's back out, Kevin. Okay, yeah, it took us 3 months. We started. We walked. We skied. We crawled. I'll tell you, when you still have 1,000 miles to go and you're crawling, because that's the fastest way to get there, you're going, "Oh boy, this is going to be a hard one." And then we paddled. We actually paddled. We had kayaks. It was 1,500 miles. We did it in 100 days, 104 days. So that's 15 miles a day. That's half a marathon a day, every day, rain or shine, Saturday or Sunday included. And we're not in running shoes and shorts and a t-shirt. We're in Arctic clothing. We have boots on. We're dragging the boats over some of the most difficult terrain on Earth through pressure ridge ice on the north shore of Ellesmere. We're above 80 degrees north latitude. There are days when you make 100 meters a day because you're dealing with pressure ridges. We did, in our worst stint, we did 17 miles in 17 days. And that wasn't sitting on our butts. That was working as hard as we could work. So yeah, go ahead.
Well, with that said too, John, like that was a phenomenal experience. But reading the book, you don't really. I mean, you do talk about how difficult it was, but also how meaningful it was, and how meaningful the landscape was. In fact, when you're reading any of your books, but I found with this book, you would read 2 pages and then want to go back and read those 2 pages again. And so it wasn't like I went to A to B and almost died. You don't write that way.
Well, thank you. Well, this reaches the heart of what I'm trying to say. When I was in Siberia during my 5 years with the Moolynaut story, this other woman, not Moolynaut, Marina, another grandmother said, if you lose the magic in your life, you lose your power. And when you're on a really hard expedition, when your back is against the wall, when you're facing the entire Arctic ice pack being moved around by the spin of the earth, when forces are bigger than you need to find the magic in your life. And I try to convey that in my writing, that we weren't out there because we were tougher than the next guy. We were out there because I'm talking about Eric Boomer, my paddling partner, and myself. And that was the beauty of that partnership with Boomer. We started this trip and we said, we're cutting weight to a minimum. We're going to be out for 3 or 4 months, no reading material, no phone things, no music, no extra weight. And we get there and Boomer's got this little crinkled pieces of paper in his pocket and he pulls it out and he says, I've got 10 pages of the Tao with me. Can I bring that? You know, I say, yeah, you could bring that. You know, it's all crinkled up and wrapped up in a Ziploc. So the thing is, when it's really tough, you hit the magic. You go for the magic, and that's where it is. We learned in kindergarten, when the going gets tough, the tough get going, you know? Well, that doesn't work out there. I say when the going gets tough, the tough drink tea. You sit down and you dig deep and you go for the magic. So I try to convey that in my writing, and thank you for seeing that.
Well, I just find too, if you would go into one of your presentations, especially that presentation when you had that book out, I remember actually seeing that show, and they're advertising as National Geographic said this about it. You were on the cover of New York Times with your trip buddy, an amazing feat of endurance or whatever. And then you go and hear you speak, and you're like, oh, he's different.
We encounter a situation where we have to choose between logic and magic. It might be something simple. Do I sit at my computer and pay the bills? Logic. Or do I play with my children? Magic. I balance on this ball as a metaphor that we're all teetering between these choices.
Well, great. I'll take that as a compliment.
Absolutely.
If you call me a crackpot, we'll take that as a compliment. Coming from you especially, buddy.
I actually do mean it as a compliment, because I didn't want to hear someone say that they're better than everybody else because they did this. It wasn't even close. When you look at your other book, The Raven's Gift, it's all to do with logic and magic, right?
Yeah. And that was a fun book to write, because before that, I had some big sponsors. We're not going to name names. But when I took off to not do the next big thing, but to spend not 5 years continuous, but 5 years of my life was focused on spending time in this village with this old shaman. All of my sponsors dropped me like a hot potato. And I took that as a really great compliment, that I was going into a world that was so special that the corporate world didn't want to talk to me.
I did not know that story, John.
Well, there you go.
Wow. That's so refreshing.
Well, thank you.
Okay, well, so your latest book, Tracking Lions, Myth, and Wilderness in
Samburu.
All right. What got you there in the first place?
What brought me there in the first place? Well, unusual travel suggestions or dancing lessons from God. I was giving a talk at the Harvard Travelers Club in Cambridge about the Ellesmere trip. And this woman walks up to me and says, I liked the way you presented your relationship with polar bears, which are the dominant predator of the North. And I need somebody to help me on a lion tracking project. And lions are the dominant predator in the savanna of East Africa. And I think you could handle yourself out there. And would you like to come? And I went, duh, yeah, sure, yes. Unusual travel suggestions or dancing lessons from God. I'll go. And that's what drew me there. And that's the start of the book.
Well, try to explain. Well, not try to explain the first intro of how it came to be. Not that it's your last book. And actually, I thought there was some deep meaning behind that. But it sounds like you just like say, "Look, I'm getting too old for this crap, Kevin." But explain the idea of why you decided to put all these things that were in your head for many years, and then finally spit it all out.
Well, on day 3 in Samburu, a lion ate a cow from one of the local villages. And the Samburu are herders. Cows are very valuable. This was a big loss. So I was asked if I would go help track down the lion. Now, we were involved with the Lion Conservation Society, so we weren't going to kill the lion. What were we going to do? Well, that never was clear to me and never is clear to me. Somehow we were supposed to meet this lion and tell it that it was being a bad lion for eating a cow, that it could eat zebras, but not cows. And I was not clear on how to do that. But whatever, when you're in Rome, do it with the Romans. So off we went. So I kind of expected us to have some sort of defense. Bear spray, AK-47, a machete, something in case things went south on us and the lion decided it wanted to eat us. Well, they gave me a wooden club, a rungu. And this is probably the most ancient Stone Age weapon that could exist on the planet. And they gave me instructions on how to neutralize a charging lion with a wooden club. You don't hit it on the head, you hit it by the side of the neck and all that. And the tracker, Deepa, who is the village headman and the head tracker, had no weaponry at all, nothing, not even a knife. So we're walking along and we're on the track of this lion, and the tracks are quite fresh. I mean, we are within an hour or less of this lion. So my initial reaction is I'm angry. I'm pissed off. They put me out here in this situation. Give me a means of staying alive. And then I go, whoa. You don't get angry when the Arctic ice pack closes in on you. You don't get angry when you're at a storm at sea. Anger isn't your best friend right now. Your best friend is being in the moment, being alert, being alive on this savanna, and being in this communication with Deepa and potentially with the lion. Lions are mammals like polar bears, and I do believe that there's a lot of communication that I can work together if we have this loving reciprocal relationship with the earth. I know that sometimes bears kill people. I know that. I got that. I know that lions sometimes eat people. But your chances are better if you're communicating with not just the lion, but the whole world. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, because that's, but looking at the whole book, that's what really it's about, is basically, it's almost sort of a confusion halfway through. You're like, yes, we get that we're connected to nature, and yet we're still through that anthropocentric view of that we're not, that we're aliens put here and we're in dominance of those species. And then the more you travel in the wilderness, the more that you've said, no, we're not, we are connected, but we're disconnected. And why are we messing the environment up so much? I think it was almost like you just sort of spilled it out on the words and saying, I've learned that we're connected, so why the heck are we messing it up?
That took me 300 pages to answer that question, so it's going to be tough sticking it into 30 seconds. But when I'm out there vulnerable in the world of the lion, with a Stone Age weapon, I ask, how did people survive? Let's go way back into the way deep Stone Age. How did people survive? And the answer is that the human population was decimated. We almost became extinct. And then all of a sudden, our population grew exponentially. This is about 70,000 years ago. So what was it? And it turns out in the anthropological record, it was not that we invented sophisticated tools and weaponry. It was that we created art, ceremony, music, dance. This is what gave us power as a species. So now I haven't forgotten your question. Why did we turn around and start messing up the planet? So in 70,000 years ago, we as a species embraced, we had cooperative power. Like we're like the ants. One ant can't survive. You need a colony of ants. One person, a man, a woman, and a cute little baby can't survive. You need the tribe. So we became a storytelling people. We became a cooperative people. We became a tribal people. And this gave us the cooperative, the sum is greater than the individual parts, power to survive. This is the anthropological fact. No anthropologist will disagree. So now, around 12,000 years ago, we started developing cities. And with cities, we had rulers. And with rulers, we had religious rulers, political rulers. And they went, oh, these people are storytelling people. They figured it out that stories work. And they started telling us outrageous stories, lies, to concentrate the power. And then we started believing the lies. And then the corporations came in and they started telling us totally outrageous lies. I mean, think about it. If you drink a Pepsi Cola, you are going to be popular. If you're a guy, you're going to get the gals. If you're a gal, you're going to get the guys. All you have to drink is a Pepsi Cola. I mean, that's as crazy as the clamshell capturing the sun and fighting with the crab over the fact of day or night. That's an outrageous lie, you see. So all these political leaders, religious leaders, corporate leaders tell us these outrageous lies. And they tell us that we have to leave the Garden of Eden and do things that will destroy the earth, like drink too much Pepsi Cola. And so it's crazy, man. It's absolutely crazy. And we fall for it. I need a new granite countertop. I need a this. I need a that. This leader tells me to, excuse the expression, make America great again. Whoopee ding, let's go, let's follow. And then we get into big trouble.
Well, Jon, does that mean, are we done for then? Or do you have hope? After all the years of traveling the wilderness, talking to different First Nations people and things like that, shamans and things like that, deep thinking all the time, presenting in front of hundreds of people that do want to conserve the wild areas. Are we done?
I don't like to answer that question, but let's say this. Robert Sapolsky, who's a neurobiologist who writes some beautiful books about our behavior, he says that our neocortex, our frontal brain, is adaptable at any time. And we are a cultural species. We're not bound by our DNA. We are alive to culture. So I will say this, we have the potential to change. We have the genetic potential to throw away our past and to open up to a new reality, a different consciousness as a species. Whether we're going to do it or not, man, I'm not making bets.
I think we will, because my 17-year-old daughter the other day reminded me once again that it was all our fault and now she has to fix it.
Well, certainly the 17-year-olds are aware of what's going on, and they are our hope. And certainly by teaching, by spreading the consciousness to certainly to the young people is our best chance right now.
Well, the interesting thing is when I finished your book, I went to reread your past book about when you went from Japan to Alaska, because the premise of that book is that there was a Stone Age culture that actually wanted to progress, or not progress, to move on to some other land where they were doing fine where they were. There was lots of fish, there was lots of game. Why move on? And I found that fascinating, because is that still going on today? Yeah, it is. I mean, why are we not trying to take care of the planet? We're just spending all this money going to another universe to see if it exists.
Well, let's not talk about going to Mars. That's the stupidest idea that I ever heard of. But yeah, there's a journey to take. And that journey is into a revised consciousness. Look, it's not going to work for me to tell you or somebody else you should recycle your plastic bags because it's good for the planet. That isn't going to work and hasn't going to work. It's my job to be a good person to recycle plastic bags. But if you can feel deep in your bones, deep in your heart, that those plastic bags are destroying other sentient creatures, your mother, the whales, the octopuses, other creatures that are thinking, conscious, loving creatures. You don't want to hurt your mother. You don't want to hurt your best friends. You shouldn't want to hurt your whale friends or your octopus friends. And so if it becomes a job or a responsibility to save the planet, it's not going to work. If it becomes a consciousness thing, that we're aware that the planet is living and loving, and these are our friends, then we have a chance.
Well, so did the shaman actually tell you that you're connected to nature, or did that shaman remind you that you were?
It's been in my DNA. My mother tells me that when I was a toddler, this is long before I could remember, when I could barely walk, I'd constantly run away from home. Every time she would turn her back, I'd be gone, out of there. So nobody had to remind me. It wasn't a question of learning to love nature. It was a question of tossing off all the bullshit and allowing myself to be who I am. And I believe that every person has their own passion. I'm not an oboe player. If I were an oboe player, then maybe my passion is playing the oboe. That's where I want to go. I believe every person has a journey. And then they tell us we have to be on this other journey. One of the great teachers, and this is a cliche, I know, but I went and heard Timothy Leary speak back in the late 1960s. And he gets up on the stage and he goes, tune in, turn on, drop out. He said, it doesn't mean drugs. It doesn't have to be drugs. Let's throw the drugs out of the picture. Turn on to who you are inside yourself. Tune in to that person and drop out of everything else. It doesn't matter. All that other stuff is extraneous. So whether it's paddling a canoe or playing an oboe or whatever it is. And the moment I said, yeah, I'm going to do that. And shortly after I heard Tim Leary speak, I'm out in, it was spring, and I was up in the alpine meadow in the Rockies, in the Colorado Rockies. And my dog started digging holes in the ground and sticking his nose in the hole and smelling the spring earth. And I was watching the dog, like, whoa, no. And then I started sticking my nose in these little holes. So you get this ring of dirt around your face and your nose is in there and you can smell that earth coming alive in the spring and all the mycorrhizal fungi and the mites and everything. And you can smell them and your face is all covered with dirt. And I go, I'm going to tune into this. And so, yeah, it was just a reawakening. It was just listening to myself rather than to the stories people were telling me.
Okay, well, that brings me to the last question, though, is so when you wake up and you're having your morning tea, do you sit there and think about all these amazing adventures you've had in the wilds, or do you think about what you're going to do that day?
I don't think too much about the past. It really is. I mean, we try to live in the present. We all fall off the wagon. Nobody lives in the present, all the time. But no, most of the time, right now I'm into mountain biking, and most of the time, my wife and I'll sit, what trails are we going to ride today? I don't go sit at the breakfast table and tell my wife about stories about Ellesmere. Man, she divorced me right quick after a while. She's in the background now. She laughed at that too.
That's a good, solid answer. Well, cheers, Jon. And
cheers. Thank you.
Right. And when, so your book is going to be out soon. And
it's going to be out soon. It's called Tracking Lions, Myth and Wilderness in Samburu. My website is Jon Turk, JONTURK.net. And the release date is a little bit up in the air, but mid-September, the book should be available, and let's hit it hard.
And this may or may not be your last book, and I doubt it's going to be your last. Cheers.
Thank you. Thanks, Kevin. Take care.